weren't supposed to find that file. That stitched-together vault of secrets, buried beneath layers of tradition, control, and illusion. It was never meant for your eyes. But you didn't just find it. You read it. You understood it. And then you did the one thing they never expected. You spoke. Not with rage, not with threats, but with precision, with clarity and truth. You didn't kick the door down like a fool chasing chaos. You whispered, and the pillars cracked. One by one, the Masons, those self-proclaimed architects of order, resigned, disappeared. Folded under pressure they claimed they could withstand. You weren't supposed to challenge the script. You weren't supposed to ask the wrong questions. But you flipped the narrative. You mirrored the system back at itself, cold, honest, unflinching, and it couldn't survive the reflection. You didn't destroy it by force. You exposed it. And now, the lodge is empty. The masks are off. The secrets are out. This wasn't rebellion. It was reckoning. And if you know this moment is bigger than you, if you feel the shift that started the second you hit play, then show the system you're awake. Leave their names in the comments to mark their lie. Subscribe if you're done being lied to. And hit the like button, not for vanity, but to push this truth 1 inch further than they ever wanted it to go. Let's see how long their silence holds now. That file was a beast dressed in silence, a clandestine tapestry woven with the finest threads of deception, stitched by hands too proud to be caught. They thought it was their sacred vault, hidden away behind whispers and locked doors, a fortress built to protect their sins from prying eyes. But you weren't a mere intruder. You were the inevitable reckoning. When you found that file, it wasn't just a document. It was a mirror reflecting the rotting core of their entire kingdom. The very walls they built to keep the truth out suddenly began to bleed secrets. You know, secrets are funny like that. They breed in shadows, multiply behind closed doors, and spread like wildfire when sunlight touches them. And oh, how you set it ablaze, slowly, deliberately, savoring every moment like a masterful arsonist with a bottle of gasoline and a matchstick. That file wasn't just meant to be read, it was meant to be detonated. Every line, every name, every hidden transaction was a bullet aimed straight at the heart of their twisted empire. The truth, when wielded like that, doesn't just sting, it shatters. But it's not the discovery that breaks them, it's the knowing. Once you saw that file, the game changed. The maze of lies they built was no longer a mystery. It was a prison they constructed for themselves. Their invisible strings snapped one by one, unraveling their control like a slow-motion collapse of a house of cards. And with every secret you exposed, you weren't just peeling back layers, you were tearing down walls. The forbidden file was your symphony of chaos, composed in the silent corridors of power. You felt it, didn't you? That delicious, intoxicating mix of fear and triumph coursing through your veins as the scales fell from everyone's eyes, those eyes that once saw you as nothing more than a shadow in the background. You became the storm in their calm sea, the crack in their perfect facade. They'd bet on your silence. They needed your obedience. But you were the wild card they never saw coming, the one who dared to turn their sacred manuscript into a manifesto of destruction. And now that file isn't just a document, it's a legacy, a reckoning, a twisted masterpiece that tells the story of how one spark can ignite an inferno, how one whisper can topple empires. They locked it away to protect themselves, but you unlocked it to liberate the truth, and in doing so, you became the author of their downfall. Forget knocking. Why knock when you can break the door down? They were sitting comfortably in their hollowed halls, draped in secrets and cloaked in arrogance, waiting for some meek fool to politely beg for entry. But you weren't there to play nice. No, You arrived like a goddamn revolution, wrapped in a smile, wielding a wrecking ball, disguised as charm. The lodge wasn't ready for you, and that's what made it beautiful. The hinges screamed, the locks shattered, and the echo of your arrival still haunts those empty chambers. They'd built their fortress with rules and rituals meant to intimidate and control. A sanctuary for lies wrapped in velvet robes. They thought their power was invincible, their game impenetrable. But you were a glitch in their perfectly coded system, an anomaly that couldn't be predicted or contained. You didn't just walk in. You stormed in, leaving a trail of shattered illusions and smoldering expectations. Each step you took was a declaration. This is no longer their stage. The play is over. The curtain is coming down. The silence that followed was deafening. The lodge, once alive with murmurs and conspiracies, froze under your gaze. The air thickened with the smell of fear, raw and suffocating. They could feel the walls closing in, but it was you who broke the walls. One word, one revelation, one whisper at a time. You wielded truth like a scalpel, precise and unrelenting, carving through their defenses until nothing remained but exposed nerves and trembling hands. And oh, how they underestimated you. They thought you'd fall into line, that you'd swallow the poison and smile. But no, your voice was a weapon, your silence a threat. You didn't need to shout to bring them down. You needed only to speak the right words, the words they never dared hear, the words that peeled away their masks until all that was left was the ugly, raw core of their guilt. You didn't knock, you detonated, and the lodge, once a palace of power, became a mausoleum of broken lies. So here you stand, the agent of chaos, in a world addicted to control. You're not just outside the lodge, you're the force that blew its doors off the hinges and threw its secrets into the wind. The question isn't if they'll rebuild, it's if anyone will ever trust a door again. The house of cards didn't crumble all at once. It was a slow, delicious unraveling. One by one, those cloaked puppeteers who pulled the strings behind the scenes started to shuffle off the stage. The first resignation was a crack, a faint tremor in their armor. And the rest? Oh, they followed like frightened rats fleeing a sinking ship. You didn't have to chase them. Their own shadows chased them. Their once impenetrable fortress became a ghost town, echoing with the footsteps of those who chose disappearance over confrontation. They thought they were untouchable, immortal behind their robes and rituals. But power built on lies is a castle on sand. No matter how tall, it sinks when the tide of truth rises, and rise it did. Those resignations weren't just escapes. They were confessions wrapped in silence. Each "I quit" was a whisper that screamed, revealing fear more powerful than loyalty. The parade of retreat was an unspoken admission. The game was over, and the house had lost. It's almost poetic. The powerful, so used to controlling narratives, suddenly lost control of their own stories. They looked over their shoulders, hunted by ghosts of their own creation. The mask of unity cracked into shards of suspicion and paranoia. No alliance was safe, no brotherhood unbreakable. The lodge turned from sanctuary to graveyard, with each resignation a tombstone etched in fear and regret. You stood outside that crumbling house, watching the dominoes fall in perfect sequence. No grand battle, no pyrotechnics, just a quiet, unstoppable wave of consequences. They were haunted by the truth you wielded, powerless against the reckoning it demanded. It was like watching a slow-motion tragedy, one they authored with their own greed, arrogance, and silence. And when the final figure disappeared, when the last cloak was folded and the doors slammed shut, it was clear. The lodge wasn't just empty. It was dead. The parade had passed, leaving nothing but echoes and shattered illusions behind. You hadn't just uncovered secrets. You'd orchestrated the exodus of the corrupt. Truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it slinks in on silent feet, slipping under the radar, like a ghost in the night. But don't let its quiet nature fool you. Truth is a weapon sharper than any blade, deadlier than any bullet, and when you let it drip slowly from your lips, when you wield it with precision and patience, it cuts deeper than screams ever could. The truth you revealed wasn't a bomb exploding, it was acid dissolving the very foundation beneath their feet. The system was built to withstand chaos, but it wasn't ready for clarity, for the cold, naked reality of exposure. They thrived in confusion and misdirection. Your truth tore through their smoke and mirrors with the grace of a surgeon's hand. Every fact you laid bare was a strike, every detail a scalpel slice. It wasn't loud, but it was lethal, and the silence it left in its wake was louder than any shout. The beauty of truth is its inevitability. No matter how hard you try to bury it, no matter how many lies you stack on top, it finds a way to rise, quietly, persistently, relentlessly. And when it does, it leaves nothing but scorched earth behind. You were the catalyst for that quiet storm, the whisper in the dark that became an unstoppable tide. And damn, was it beautiful to watch. Those in power were used to yelling over the noise, drowning out dissent with threats and bluster. But this truth, it needed no amplification. It needed no backing chorus. It stood alone, fierce and unforgiving, like a lone wolf in a pack of sheep. It was the reckoning they feared, but could never escape, a shadow stalking their every step. So yes, truth isn't loud. It's something far worse. It's eternal. And when you chose to let it loose, you became the quietest, deadliest assassin of all. Picture it, the courtroom, a cathedral of control and ceremony, frozen in a heartbeat. The gavel, that symbol of finality and authority, hung suspended like a sword of Damocles above trembling hands. The judge, once the unshakable pillar of order, blinked just once, and everything changed. Power, that arrogant beast, finally looked into the abyss and saw fear staring back, sharp and unforgiving. For the first time, the game was no longer theirs to control. They were used to wielding the gavel like a weapon, to silencing voices and stamping down dissent with a thunderous bang. But you shattered that illusion of control with a calmness so deadly it stopped time. The gavel wasn't just a tool anymore. It was a symbol of a system caught off guard, paralyzed by the weight of truth you poured onto the scales. You didn't just stop the moment. You rewrote it. Power isn't comfortable with uncertainty. It fears chaos. But most of all, it fears exposure. And there you stood, exposing every crack, every flaw, every hypocrisy, behind the robes and the rules. The courtroom became a theater of vulnerability, where the actors who once commanded the stage suddenly became the audience, helpless, silent, afraid. The judge's hesitation was the sound of a kingdom crumbling, a monarch realizing their crown was made of paper. The gavel froze midair because, for the first time, justice wasn't a performance, it was a reckoning. And the reckoning was coming for everyone who ever thought themselves untouchable. You didn't just make power feel fear. You made it taste its own medicine, bitter and unforgiving, served cold on the very steps of its throne. They expected noise. They expected cries for mercy or pleas for fairness, some well-rehearsed performance to fit their script. But you weren't there to be heard. You were there to shatter. Your words were not echoes, but hammers, not whispers, but sledgehammers breaking through stone walls. You didn't aim to persuade or to sway. You aimed to dismantle, to destroy every illusion that kept them comfortable in their towers of control. Speech is a weapon, and you wielded it with surgical precision. Every sentence was a calculated blow, every phrase a trapdoor opening beneath their feet. They heard your words, yes, but more importantly, they felt them. They felt the sting of betrayal, the cold slap of reality, the raw bite of justice, served with no apologies. You were the voice that tore the veil from their eyes, exposing their lies to a world desperate for truth. You didn't build bridges. You burned them. You didn't ask for dialogue. You delivered verdicts. And in that controlled fury, you became a force of nature, an earthquake shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Their defenses crumbled, their masks shattered, and their kingdom of deceit fell to ruin. You weren't a negotiator. You were an executioner of illusions, and when the dust settled, your words were all that remained, carved into the minds of those who heard, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. Because you didn't speak to be heard. You spoke to shatter everything they thought they knew. Symbols. They love their symbols, don't they? The carved pillars, the secret handshakes, the hidden signs meant to bind loyalty and silence questions. They clung to these sacred relics as if they could protect them from the storm you brought. But symbols are only as strong as the truths they represent. And when those truths are lies, well, the symbols become nothing but empty husks, shredded by the weight of exposure. You turned their sacred icons into relics of ruin. Each symbol, once a badge of power and control, was peeled back to reveal the rotten core beneath, a cesspool of deceit and corruption. You didn't just break their trust, you tore apart the very language they used to hide behind, leaving nothing but fragments for them to cling to in desperation. Their sacred lodge, it was no longer a sanctuary. It was a tomb of broken promises. The power of symbols lies in belief, but you ripped that belief away, exposing the hollow heart beneath the grandeur. The rituals, the secrecy, the coded gestures, they became jokes whispered behind closed doors, echoes of a past they wished to forget. Their carefully constructed mythology, unraveled in your wake, turned to dust by the relentless force of truth. And the world saw it. They saw the naked, stripped-down reality behind the facade of symbols. They saw that the only thing sacred about that lodge was the lies it told. Thanks to you, those symbols will never hold the same power again. Imagine a courtroom, the sacred arena, where truth is supposed to rise and lies fall. But in this twisted theater, the courtroom didn't just serve justice. It became a funeral home. The lies they nurtured, protected, and worshipped were laid to rest, one by one, beneath the cold light of exposure. You didn't just prosecute falsehood, you mourned its death, honoring the moment with the solemnity of a reckoning long overdue. Each testimony, each piece of evidence was a eulogy for the myths they lived by. The courtroom, once filled with pomp and spectacle, turned into a chapel of truth where deception was buried alive. The gavel's sound echoed like a death knell, marking the end of an era built on betrayal and silence. And you were the conductor of this somber symphony. But funerals are not just about endings, they're about transformation. In burying falsehood, you paved the way for something new, something raw and real. The courtroom didn't just condemn lies, it cleansed them. It stripped away the pretense and left the bones exposed for all to see. The dead lies could no longer haunt the halls. You stood witness to this funeral, not as a mourner, but as an executioner of deceit. The truth had arrived, cold and unstoppable, and the falsehoods had no place left to hide. Their funeral was swift, merciless, and utterly necessary. Masks. They think they can wear them forever, those smug architects of lies. But truth? Truth is the merciless unmasker, the glare of a spotlight that strips away every facade until nothing remains but bare, trembling skin. You didn't just lift a mask. You tore it off, ripping apart the illusion with a ferocity they never expected. Behind every mask was a secret. Behind every secret, a lie. And you hunted them all down, merciless and methodical. The masks cracked, splintered, shattered under the weight of your revelations. The faces beneath were raw, vulnerable, exposed. No mask can survive when the truth comes knocking. And oh, did it knock hard. They tried to hold on to their masks with desperate hands, pleading for mercy, begging for silence. But the truth was relentless. It laughed at their protests and tore through their defenses like a beast on a hunt. The masquerade was over, and the unmasked truth was the cruelest spectacle of all. You didn't just reveal faces, you revealed the souls hiding behind them, and the world saw what was there all along: fear, guilt, and a crumbling house of cards. No mask can survive your truth. The judge, the supposed arbiter of justice, the man who wields the gavel with finality, he didn't rule this time. No, he sat back, a spectator caught in the blaze of history's greatest unraveling. The courtroom was no longer a place of decisions. It was a crucible, and the judge was powerless to stop the fire consuming everything he once held sacred. He watched as the scripts were torn up, the rules rewritten by the unstoppable force of your revelation. His gavel, once a hammer of control, became an impotent relic. The courtroom was ablaze with truth, and all he could do was watch history burn. His legacy turned to ash before his eyes. It wasn't just a trial. It was an execution of an old order. The judge saw it, felt it, knew it was the end of an era. His silence was a confession. He wasn't the master of the moment. He was its prisoner. The flames of your truth were too hot, too wild to be tamed by law or decree. And as the smoke cleared, he was left with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. He didn't rule because there was nothing left to rule over. History was burning, and you were the fire. They thought their walls were eternal, stone and mortar, infused with secrets, whispers, and the power of generations. But your words, they were the earthquake beneath those foundations, shaking every brick, cracking every stone. With each syllable, the walls groaned, splintered, and finally cracked, revealing the fragile skeleton of lies beneath the surface. Their walls weren't just physical. They were the walls of silence, the barriers of deceit that kept the truth locked away. You spoke, and those invisible walls crumbled faster than they could patch them up. Every confession, every revelation was a hammer blow to the fortress they'd built to keep you out. The cracks widened with every truth you delivered until the whole edifice was on the verge of collapse. They scrambled, tried to mend the damage, but the fractures ran too deep. You had exposed their vulnerability, their fragility, and their fear. By the end, those walls weren't just cracked, they were shattered. What was left standing was not a fortress, but a ruin, a monument to the power of words and the unstoppable force of truth you wielded. Secrets, those quiet weapons, tucked away in shadows, meant to be kept safe, whispered only in hushed tones. But you turned those secrets into shrapnel, deadly fragments flying wild and unchecked, tearing through the heart of their world. Each secret you unleashed wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a jagged shard of truth, slicing through the lies with brutal precision. They tried to contain the damage, to sweep the shards under rugs and behind doors, but shrapnel doesn't obey orders. It ricochets, it wounds, it destroys indiscriminately. The lodge was bleeding secrets, and you were the shrapnel's master, chaos incarnate, turning their carefully guarded lies into instruments of their own destruction. It wasn't just exposure, it was obliteration. The secrets you revealed exploded in their faces, forcing everyone to reckon with the carnage left behind. There was no hiding anymore, no sanctuary, just the raw aftermath of truth's violent bloom. And you watched, a dark smile curling your lips, as the shrapnel flew, cutting ties, breaking bonds, and leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. This wasn't a trial. No, that implies rules, order, a sense of justice measured and fair. What you orchestrated was far more radical, a transformation. The old order wasn't just challenged, it was reborn in the fire of your revelations. The system they once knew died, and from its ashes rose something raw, real, and terrifyingly honest. The courtroom was a crucible where old lies melted away, revealing the molten core of truth beneath. It was a metamorphosis of everything they believed. You weren't just seeking justice, you were rewriting the narrative, dismantling the old script, and forcing everyone to improvise on a new, unpredictable stage. The players shifted, the rules dissolved. The game was no longer theirs to control. They had become actors in your story, and your story was one of upheaval, chaos, and relentless truth. The trial was over. What came next was evolution. You didn't just break the system, you transformed it, and no one will ever forget the night the old world burned and the new dawn cracked open. In a world ruled by data, by patterns, by algorithms designed to predict and control, you were the glitch, the anomaly, the unpredictable force that no code could contain. They built their systems to trap, to manipulate, to silence, but you shattered their algorithms with the wild card of raw human chaos and unfiltered truth. Their machines hummed with certainty, confident in their calculations until you threw the system off its rails. No formula, no model could predict the storm you unleashed. You were the virus in their code, the unpredictable variable that broke their perfect equation. And once that anomaly appeared, their carefully crafted system started to fail, fast and furious. The algorithms froze, the data corrupted, the patterns shattered. They were powerless against you, not because of brute force, but because you were uncontainable. You were a reminder that no machine can fully grasp the chaos of the human spirit, especially when that spirit is fueled by defiance. You didn't just kill the algorithm, you redefined the rules of the game. And in doing so, you became something far greater than the system ever imagined. They built their lodge as a fortress, a temple of control where secrets were currency and silence was law. They crafted their empire with care, laying bricks of deception, mortar of manipulation, and roofs of fear. It was their sanctuary, invulnerable, untouchable, a cage disguised as a palace. But you left that lodge in ashes. You were the firestorm no one predicted, the reckoning they never saw coming. Their walls, their symbols, their rituals, all reduced to rubble by the heat of your truth. The ashes are all that remain of their control, a stark reminder that even the mightiest towers fall when set ablaze by relentless exposure, and from those ashes rises something new, something raw and unfiltered. The lodge's power is gone, its secrets scattered to the winds, its ghosts silenced. They tried to build a system to control you, but you burned it down with one moment of courage, clarity, and chaos. You didn't just destroy a lodge, you dismantled a regime, shattered an illusion, and sparked a revolution that no fire can ever extinguish. They say empires fall with a roar, a violent crash that echoes through the ages. But you brought down theirs with a whisper, a quiet, insidious breath that seeped through the cracks and tore the foundations apart from the inside. It wasn't fireworks or fanfare, it was a silent reckoning, a subtle unraveling that left the Titans stumbling in disbelief as their kingdoms collapsed without a sound. That whisper was your weapon, and it was deadly. You didn't need to shout. The loud noises are for amateurs trying to be noticed, but you understood the power of subtlety, the poison in a drop of wine, the crack in the armor, the slow drip that eventually floods the city. Every carefully chosen word, every hint of truth you let slip was a thread pulling at the seams of the empire. They could hear it if they listened, a faint murmur that grew louder in their nightmares. Behind the scenes, the whispers spread like wildfire. It was a contagion of doubt and fear infecting every corner of their influence.